Before we open our remote controllers, how does a remote controller works? A remote controller sends a binary signal using its infrared LED on the front. Infrared is at the tip of the visible light, which is why some cameras can see it while our eyes can't. Our remote controller will mostly consist of a battery, logic IC, oscillator, push button switch, and an infrared LED. The battery powers the oscillator, IC, and the input. The oscillator then generates a constant DC wave to the IC. The input then controls the IC of what binary code it will send, similar to Morse code. The IC then modifies the constant DC wave to turn it into a signal and powers the infrared LED. It's worth taking notes that some remote controllers may only have one IC, therefore the oscillator may already be included on the IC. There are also other remote controllers that are rechargeable and may have a BMS and a charging port. To start opening our Must TV remote controller, remove the batteries on the back. Since this remote doesn't have any screws, we can immediately open it using a pry tool. Try to force the remote to open a slit, then continue forcing it to open around the remote. To completely disassemble it, just carefully pull the components from the case. To reassemble everything, just simply place the PCB on the case, followed by the rubber buttons, then the other half of the case. To close it, just simply press the case to close it. The first remote is completely fine and has no damage. All of the buttons are still working and much more easier to open and close. Opening the second remote is relatively the same as the first one. The remote controller probably has been lived by cockroaches and contains so much gunk in it. The PCB was probably wet, which caused some part of it to inflate. The conductors of the PCB became very brittle and has been accidentally removed while cleaning. Again, it's practically the same as the first two remote controls, but this time it has screws, and one of the screws has already been corroded. The usually easiest way to remove a corroded screw is to use a long nose pliers, but it doesn't work. So I decided to use my drill on the screw. I tried to make deeper grooves to be able to use my screwdrivers, but it didn't work. So I tried my pliers again since I've already caused enough vibrations to the screw. The remote still mostly works, but some of the buttons have too much resistance on the contacts. Also, the spring on the battery has been completely destroyed by rust and needs a replacement. I also noticed during testing that the infrared LED lights up when I'm connecting it to the ground probe of my oscilloscope.